Dear reader, I'm Tony and this is Book Text, and I'm here today to wrap up my Victober 2020 experience with you. But first, our word of the day is an adjective, anxiogenic. You can maybe imagine what it means. It is anything that causes or produces anxiety. So I hope your circumstances are not anxiogenic. So I want to cover kind of how I did with my challenges for Victober and then how I did with my TBR, which included other things beyond the challenges because I was way overly ambitious, as we typically are for these kinds of readathons. So first, there was a challenge to read the Victorian equivalent of your favorite genre, and I went with mystery books. And the book I chose at the beginning of the month was The Dead Secret by Wilkie Collins. And I did not get to this one yet, but I do have plans to read it this month for an Instagram readathon that I'll mention a little bit later. Then the second challenge was to read a book of letters or diary, and I was planning to read the letters between George Eliot and Harriet Beecher Stowe, an American writer, at the same time. And I also did not get to that challenge because I could only access the letters online, and I am not good at reading long pieces of work online. So that was a challenge for me, and I will have to figure out a better way to access those letters. Then there was a challenge to read a lesser-known work from my favorite author, and for this one I chose Scenes of Clerical Life by George Eliot. This is a collection of 3 novellas that are interrelated, and I started this one at the end of Victober, but I underestimated how long it would take me to read it. So I am actually still reading this, but I do plan to finish it soon. I'm enjoying what I've read so far. The fourth challenge was to read a book that's been on my TBR for a while, and I went with The Warden by Anthony Trollope because I've wanted to start his books, and this just seems like a good place to start at the beginning of a series. And so I did get to this one this month. It was a bit of a rough reading experience for my first Trollope, but it in no way turned me off from reading more Anthony Trollope books. So that was, I think, a success in my estimation. Then there was the group read, which was Shirley by Charlotte Bronte. And I did get to this one and I loved it. I was not expecting to love it quite so much. It featured and explored more interesting relationships and plot lines than I was expecting. And I took a lot of notes on just so many great passages peppered throughout. So I will totally read Shirley again. And then the sixth challenge was to read wearing something Victorian or Victorian inspired. And I read while wearing a Victorian inspired shawl and necklace. So I did okay. I met 3.5 of the 6 challenges, which is a passing grade according to my calculations. Then I thought I would rank the books that I did finish, especially the Victorian books. I did read one Victorian nonfiction. It was about the Victorian era, I should say, not written in the Victorian era. So I'm not going to include that on this list. But of the books that I finished, these are my rankings. So the number 1 Victorian book that I read this month was Shirley, that was the group read. Unsurprisingly, I've just mentioned how much I loved it. The number 2 book was Thomas Hardy's The Woodlanders. This was just a really beautiful, exquisite book about different relationships. It ended kind of sourly, and I liked that. It was complicated. I didn't agree with everything that happened, and that's good. It made me think. It made me form opinions about things, and so I enjoyed this one. Put that as my number 2. My number 3 was one that I wasn't planning to read at all. I just needed an audiobook, and I thought, let's read or listen to a Victorian audiobook. So this was The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. It's a really simple book. When you think about it, it's not very long. It's not really complicated. There's not a lot of characters. But I just love H.G. Wells and his science fiction and the kind of interesting ways that he deals with Victorian concerns, class issues especially, but but through the lens of science fiction. And so that's my number 3. My number 4 was Elizabeth Gaskell's Sylvia's Lovers. It wasn't the best Elizabeth Gaskell I've ever read. There were a lot of things in here that I thought were done really well, but also a few things that I wish were different. So I just put this a little bit lower than the other books, but I still am glad I read it and enjoyed it. I don't know if I'll pick it up again though. My number 5 was The Warden by Anthony Trollope. Again, it was a bit of a rough experience. I wasn't quite sure if I liked Trollope's writing style, and I've been told countless times that it's not his best work, so to keep reading Trollope. But it got a lot better for me towards the end. The second half was a lot better than the first half for sure. So this is down at number 5. And then number 6 is Robert Louis Stevenson's The Master of Ballentre. The more I thought about this book, the lower I ranked it, because it was just not a very cohesive story. There were a lot of parts that I was confused at. The premise about the two brothers quarreling was not incredibly done well or in an interesting way. So I'm glad I read it. I was able to finish it. It wasn't too hard to finish or read, but it didn't leave me with a lasting impression, which I prefer to have from my novels. So that was down in my lowest ranked of the, not a terrible book, but my lowest ranked of the ones that I read. Of the books that I started, but I'm still reading, of course, I'm still reading Scenes of Clerical Life by George Eliot. So I have not ranked that one because I did not finish it, but I think it would be a much higher than some of these other books. Maybe number 2 or number 3. Books I didn't get to, but plan to get to eventually. I've mentioned already The Dead Secret by Wilkie Collins. I'm going to read this for a November readathon on Instagram called Victorian Sensation Book Club, hosted by Silver Linings and Pages and Read Write Janice, and I will link to them below in the description. But I'm looking forward to. I did want to get to this one, but I just ran out of time, and of course overestimated my ability to read these books. So I will get to this one this month. And then the other one I didn't get to, but I had planned in my TBR, was Elizabeth Gaskell's Cousin Phyllis and Other Stories. So I will hopefully get to this eventually. It's a collection of stories, so maybe I'll be able to read a little bit here and there, just kind of dip in and dip out. We'll see. So overall, will I participate in Victober next year? You bet. I loved it. I will definitely do it again. I think this was the second or third year that I'd participated. It was my first year on BookTube participating. And will I continue reading Victorian literature in the meantime? Also, you bet. I love Victorian literature, and this was a great way for me to explore new authors in an environment that I might not normally have done so, in a really supportive environment, I think. So I just loved Victober. Tell me, how was your Victober? And remember, there's always another book.